In 2015, director J.J. Abrams gave the world a long-awaited continuation set in our favorite far, far away galaxy.
In 2024, we kick off 5 straight weeks of a bargain brand.
The film is Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens.
The whiskey is Jim Beam Double Oaked Bourbon.
And we'll review them both. This is
the Film and Whiskey Podcast. Welcome to the Film and Whiskey Podcast, where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey. I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And Brad, we are smack dab in, well, I guess not the middle, in the beginning of a run of Star Wars movies here. I said a few weeks ago that we're about to close out a 5-week run of Disney movies, and it's true because Disney owns everything now. And we're starting with 3 weeks of Star Wars and ending with 2 weeks of Marvel. And I just keep wondering, what have we done to deserve this?
Yeah, when will it all end, Robert? What we did to deserve this was allow you to pick the theme for this season.
I ran it by you. You said, hey, that sounds great, in true Brad G fashion, having done no research. And now you have brought this upon yourself, too. So there you go.
Yeah, my trust in you has been misplaced for almost... 15 years now?
Yeah, it has, man. My trust in myself has been misplaced even longer. So that's what landed us here. Folks, if you're new to Film and Whiskey, hello, welcome in. What we do on this show is review movies and review whiskeys. So you've come to the right place if you're looking for either of those things. This season, what we're talking about, is the highest grossing film of each year from 1988 to 2019. Brad, we are nearing the end of this season, and I think that in the first few weeks of this season, it was like, okay, 80s, early 90s, I get this. Mid 90s blockbusters, sure. And then all of a sudden I blink and we're in 2015, and it feels like we are worlds apart from the Hollywood of Rain Man and Sister Act.
Dude, it is wild to think that Hollywood made those movies in the 80s and 90s, and here we are in the teens of the 2000s. Just with a splurge of these IP-driven, no thought put into them, the peak of cinema, if you will.
I have never so much appreciated the film American Sniper as I do now, though, Brad, because it already broke up what was beginning to become a monotonous descent into Disney. But it really does seem like it was the last time that a real original American film made any sort of a dent at the box office. Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful for that. Now, again, we're going to look at 2 of the 3 Disney sequels that Disney made in the Star Wars canon. And we're also looking at the one-off kind of offshoot film Rogue One next week. So, with Rogue One, I have slightly different feelings than I do for this trilogy overall, because Rogue One stands on its own. But I also, Brad, if I'm going to start talking about the movie here a little bit, I really, truly don't like the sequels, except for one of them, and it's the one that you probably like the least. But I feel like anything regarding the sequels, everyone's negative feelings about all 3 movies get directed in full force to whichever movie is being discussed at that moment. And I will say, I don't think this is a great movie. I also don't think this is like a terrible movie. It's kind of whatever you want it to be. If you want it to mark the descent into the worst possible Star Wars IP slop, sure, it is. If you want to consider it a return to form and hearkening back to the days of yore, sure, it's that. I kind of feel like it's somewhere in between those 2 things. And because it is so meh, that makes it really not that much fun to talk about. And so people kind of gravitate towards one end of the spectrum or the other in a way that may or may not actually be fair to the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I think that in general, I'm always somebody who desires for the pendulum to swing a smaller amount to be closer to the middle. But I will agree with you. I think Force Awakens doesn't try hard enough to be anything distinct.
Mm-hmm.
And so it ultimately just becomes this kind of sloppy cut rate work in a universe that just kind of deserves more.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so they handed over the reins to this trilogy to J.J. Abrams, and I think the plan initially was that they were going to find 3 up-and-coming directors to both write and direct their own Star Wars movie. So it was J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson, and then the third film was planned to be directed and written by Colin Trevorrow, who had made a really cool little indie movie, got handed the big boy reins, and then he made, what was it? It was one of the Jurassic Parks? No, I don't know. He made something that people freaked out about, and it kind of ruined his career because the film was so bad. And then they yanked that away from him. And at the same time they yanked that away from him, audiences had started reacting really negatively to what Rian Johnson had done in the second film. And so they called back up J.J. Abrams and said, hey, people were happy back then when you were running things. Save our ship, please, J.J. Abrams. And what J.J. Abrams did instead was give us The Rise of Skywalker, which has since tainted everyone's reputation of any good thoughts they had towards J.J. Abrams. Mm-hmm. And like I said, people have read retroactively poor things back onto this film. Now, I do think there are a lot of J.J. Abrams tendencies at play in this movie that are very obviously there. I think J.J. Abrams is kind of the king of kicking the can down the road narratively. And we'll talk about all that, Brad, but I just kind of want to get your initial impressions. We're talking about the sequels. We're talking about JJ. What comes to mind as you sit on the therapist's couch of airing Star Wars grievances here?
Oh, man. Is this my opportunity? Do I get to start just lambasting Disney for what they've done?
Oh, man.
To a beloved franchise?
I can already tell. I can sense the energy that you've been building to just dump on this sequel trilogy.
I was supposed to drive for about 8 hours today, and it ended up being about 10 with accidents and traffic and wildness. So yeah, I'm ready, man.
What were you going to say though? Oh, go ahead.
Here's the deal, Bob. At the end of the day, I walked out of this movie and I was so pumped that I had watched another Star Wars movie. And then I went and saw it again. With some friends, because I saw it initially. It was actually a good time. We went to see it in Boston the night before I moved back home, because my wife and I lived in Boston for 3 months and hated it. We go to see it in this little indie theater, and I have never been in a movie theater where they tuned the audio up higher. I mean, it was so freaking loud that I didn't know what anybody's names in the movie were unless they were from the previous movies. Like, I had no idea that Poe's name was Poe. I had no idea that Rey's name was Rey. It was really rough how loud it was. And secondly, we had a dude sitting behind us drinking something out of a mason jar that just smelled like moonshine. And he was very loud and obnoxious.
Can I clue you in to what that was, Brad?
What was it, Bob?
It was moonshine.
Oh, yeah. It
historically
sure
sipped out of jars.
So the first viewing wasn't great, and yet I still walked out like pumped about the movie. I think I called my friend Mike, and we talked about it being like an 8 or a 9 out of 10. And then I saw it again with friends, and then we went and saw it at the Great Lakes Science Center in IMAX. And that was a terrible experience because you were like laying on your back the whole time. And then I went and saw it again. And then I went and saw it again. So I'm really not kidding, Bob. I've seen this movie like 5 times in theaters.
Wow.
Which is a lot. By the time I got to the end of seeing it 5 times in theaters, I was much less impressed, but I still held on. My precious little 25-year-old heart was still holding on to the idea that, this was a decent movie, and as long as they take it somewhere with the next 2, I think we'll look back on this pretty fondly.
And that's kind of my thesis statement for today, Brad. Not even thesis statement. It's my hypothesis that I want to test. It's the question that I need an answer to. Is J.J. Abrams relying solely on somebody else to bail out the fact that he does not really have the balls to make big narrative choices? And
whoa.
Or is he setting up a perfect first chapter, knowing that sequels typically deepen whatever happened in the first one? And I can't decide which that is when it comes to this movie, Brad. And so with that sort of Ryan Seacrest throwing to commercial cliffhanger, I think it's time for us to throw over to our first segment of the day, which we call Brad Explains.
Brad's gonna give us the movie plot with only 60 seconds ticking on the clock. So let's go ahead and hear your take with this little segment that we call Brad Explains.
Brad Explains is the part of the podcast where Brad breaks down the plot of the movie that he has just seen for the sixth time, at least the sixth time. Have you watched this on home video at all, Brad? Or did you just cut yourself off at 5 theatrical viewings?
I don't think I've ever watched it since I saw it in theaters. Like I watched The Last Jedi once afterwards just to like confirm how terrible it was. And let me tell you what, Bob, I did not need to watch Rise of Skywalker again to know how terrible it was. This one I actually weirdly have not seen since I saw it in theaters.
All right. So, Brad, even though it's been almost a decade since you've seen this movie, you should have the general outline pretty much memorized at this point. You have 1 minute to break down the plot of this movie. Now, folks, we are going to get into massive, massive spoilers, and this film does have at least one massive spoiler in it. So if you are even remotely interested in seeing this film and you haven't yet, hit pause here, come back and rejoin us after you watch the movie. But Brad, it's time for you to spoil away, my good friend. 1 minute and go.
Star Wars Episode VII, The Force Awakens, is A New Hope. Go watch that. Oh, wait. Instead of Ben Kenobi dying, Han Solo dies and Luke doesn't say any lines. There you go.
Are you really going to stop there?
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't know if you're going to stick by your snarkiness or if you're going to reframe it afterwards.
Have you ever heard of this thing called The Bit?
No.
Because I am committed to it.
Listen, man, you have been stepping on my bits. That sounds terrible. You really, well, that too. You have been undermining every bit I've tried to do on this podcast for 8 seasons now. I don't feel one bit bad.
They call me the Underminer, baby.
All right, dude, let's dive into talking about the movie in earnest. And I don't think we can do that without trying to answer the J.J. Abrams question, because his fingerprints are all over this. Now, Abrams made his bones in TV. He was very famous for, I believe he started with Felicity, but then he moved to Alias, which was really the one that, like, cracked everything open for him. People loved that show. Then he develops Lost, and Lost is where you really get down to the idea of what J.J. Abrams calls the mystery box approach to writing, which is essentially a really fancy way of him describing never giving the audience any answers. That if you continually keep things in the mystery box, they will keep coming back and repeatedly watching your show, hoping to figure out what happens in the mystery box.
And then you get to the end of the show, and the mystery box is actually just the story box where all of your friends' terrible stories went to die. And here we are, JJ. Thanks a lot.
Inside the mystery box is the revelation that they were dead the whole time. Who would have thought it? So
who would have thunk it?
There are some ardent Lost defenders out there. I remember watching the first 2 seasons of Lost when it was on TV, like in real time. We watched it every week. And by the end of season 2, we were like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand what's going on. And not even in like a, this is weird, but I'm intrigued X-Files kind of way. Just like you're not answering any questions and now there's polar bears. What the hell? And what's this bunker? And who are the others? And I don't know. Did you watch Lost, Brad?
Dude, the first 2 seasons of Lost were some of the most fun television.
Oh, so good.
I think I've ever watched live. I think we lost interest somewhere halfway through season 3.
Yeah, that sounds about right for me too.
But man, oh man, those first 2 seasons, heck of a good time.
So that's J.J. Abrams. Then they start giving him movies. And I want to say he had a hand in developing the Cloverfield films. Maybe he was a producer on those. And then he finally kind of jumps in the ring with Mission Impossible 3 and with this film called Super 8, which is an alien invasion movie where he starts drawing comparisons to Steven Spielberg. And it's really obvious that he is just ripping straight from E.T. and Close Encounters. But Brad, I am like the world's biggest Spielberg fan. I have never seen him as a Spielberg in terms of how he makes movies, whether it's how he moves the camera, whether it's his ability to actually like dive into human emotion. He just kind of always seemed like an imposter to me, if I'm being honest, especially when you start comparing someone to Spielberg. Like my ears perk up, but then I'm really on the defensive about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of that comes to a head when you get here with The Force Awakens. And I think all his bad tendencies come out here. I'm really just curious, man, like, what are the JJ isms that you see in this film, and do they work or do they not work for you?
I think that the two JJ isms that I kind of see here is that it seems like JJ writes movies from the origin of like things he thinks look cool, like cool shots. And I'm not going to lie, man, he nails some killer shots. Like even in The Rise of Skywalker, like the shot of the Death Star crashed on the moon and like the waves crashing on it. And he has some killer one-off, really beautiful, interesting shots. There's a lot that he can do there. And he likes silly Marvel jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And then everything else just kind of feels like filler. So I don't know. Is that JJ-isms?
I don't really know. It's really hard to pin down what J.J. Abrams is as a director because all of his movies are so tonally different from each other. I mean, look at Mission Impossible 3, a film that you and I are ardent defenders of, versus this movie. And stylistically, tonally, just completely different, man. I really don't know. I know that JJ is a writer by trade, but I do think that he has the chops, at least a little bit, from a director's standpoint. And what I really noticed this time around, and I've also watched next week's movie, Rogue One, so forgive the comparison here, Brad, but like, I think Rogue One is a movie where I've always felt like it had such a massive scale because they do such a great job of showing like, you can see the outline of the Death Star in like the planet's atmosphere, and everything seems like it's just you're fighting on this big cosmic scale in every shot. But I have to say, this movie also has a really good sense of scale, especially when it comes to working on movie sets. Like there's a lot of times in this movie where you can tell like we're on a set, but then when you think about how massive some of these sound stages must have been, I'm thinking in particular, there's a scene, it's like the first raid on Maz Kanata's joint when everything gets blown up and then Rey gets captured. And you get this incredible tracking shot of Finn running across all of the wreckage of the whole set, like chasing her and going like, Rey, that's all real stuff. There's like stuff around him exploding and smoking and on fire. And it's like, wow, remember when we had real stuff on a set for an actor to interact with?
Oh, yeah. I am avidly a fan of real stuff on set. I think it makes movies so much better. And I'm with you. I think that there are certain things that JJ is good at. His movies move nicely. Like it's not the kind of camera work that you get from a Spielberg, but I do love the sense of movement, and he uses his unique camera shots well, and he doesn't use them all the time. Like you don't really get a ton of Dutch angles, but every once in a while you get a straight over the top angle. Like Finn running, and so you get some interesting camera movement, and I like the way he films X-Wings and the way that they move in the space above Maz Kanata's place. Like there's some cool moments like that, but there's other problems that we'll get to later.
I mean, why don't we just get to them now? Like, where do you want to start with the movie? We've kind of talked about the JJ of it all. And I wanted to talk about that first because I think that kind of casts I don't know, not like a pallor over everything, but like everything in this movie feels very rooted in the fact that it's a J.J. Abrams movie, for better or for worse.
Sure.
Whether it's the acting, whether it's the special effects, the beats of the story, the lack of beats of the story, it all goes back to him. And so with that as our kind of like root system of this Star Wars tree, like where do you want to go first in talking about the movie, Brad?
Oh, the humor.
Oh,
Here's the deal, man. I remember the first time I saw this, up until this current viewing, the opening 5 minutes of this movie are stellar. Like, I love Kylo Ren's introduction. I love the way he uses the Force to, like, catch a blaster bolt midair and hold it there. Like, that's cool. It's a addition to how we know the Force to work in the other movies that doesn't feel forced or wild. It's like, wow, this is a new dark Sith that has found out a new way to manipulate the Force, and he's got a cool mask, and his voice sounds weird and cool and menacing, and I'm in on all of it. Even the kind of chintzy dialogue, the MacGuffin dialogue between Poe and the random guy on the planet. Like, not great dialogue, but this is Star Wars. I'm okay with not great dialogue. And then Poe looks at him and goes, "Are you going to talk first? Am I going to talk first? Wait, who's talking first? Are we waiting here?" And I literally want to like rip my ear canals out that I had to listen to that in a Star Wars film. And then the entire character of Finn is based around that. And the few tiny moments where you get to chew on something with John Boyega, and he actually gets to show like, hey, I'm really struggling with what I'm doing here. I don't know who I am. I'm trying to figure out an identity. He has a few little moments like that you would hope would be a J.J. Abrams specialty, and then they're immediately undermined by this childish humor that just doesn't fit in the Star Wars universe.
Man, I really hate to start with the cast with this person, but I want to start with Oscar Isaac, because he is a guy that he kind of burst onto the scene and got really, really big in critic circles back in like 2013 because he made a movie with the Coen brothers called Inside Llewyn Davis. He was the star of the movie. It was, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the movie. His performance is unreal in that movie. And a lot of people thought he was going to get nominated for that movie. He doesn't, but it kind of kickstarts this trajectory that he's on. He makes some movies with A24. Ex Machina is one that people really liked. He makes a movie called A Most Violent Year, where he plays a gangster kingpin. And he has this like menace and weight and heft to his performance that is like, this guy's going to be a movie star. And then you hear he's about to be the new like Han Solo character, basically, in Star Wars. Like, he's the guy that's bringing the charisma. And then you see what they do with his character. And it's like, this character has no development, no backstory, no weight. But also, like, I really think Oscar Isaac is just miscast in this movie. He doesn't have that like particular sense of like easygoing humor. And so when he's doing the humor, it feels forced. It doesn't feel like even the best Marvel actors have the ability to pull some of that humor off. That's just not really who Oscar Isaac is. And every time I watch these movies, I'm like, damn, he's such a good actor, but he feels so out of place in these movies.
Yeah, I had literally never heard of him before this movie. And then he has a few moments of bad humor, disappears for half of the movie because they want you to think he's dead, like any other movies in this series. And then he's not dead because magic. And he doesn't really have anything else to do other than being a cool fighter pilot. And I'm with you, man. I think that the talent is there, but JJ just does not use it well. I mean, I need to go watch Inside Llewyn Davis or any of his other movies because I don't think I still have seen him in anything else.
Oh, he's a great actor. This is just not his speed, man. And I really, I just wonder, was the script really long and they had to cut it back? Because each of the characters in this movie feels like to certain extents their characters got trimmed down. And I think that in the case of Kylo Ren and Rey and Finn, their character arcs are still a little bit more intact. But when you get down to like the pose of the world here, it's like, he's the fourth lead of the movie. How much do we really need to know about him? And so they just kind of make him weirdly supportive of the other characters, but not really doing too much.
Yep.
I don't know, man. Before we get into Finn and Rey, let's talk a little bit about Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Now, he's another guy that was doing some smaller indie movies. He's also in Inside Llewyn Davis. His big break came on the HBO show Girls, and then he lands Star Wars, and it's like, oh, he's like a 6'4" Marine. This is going to be pretty dope as the bad guy. I know that you are not a huge fan of Kylo Ren. Dude, I think Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, even in the worst film of the sequels, is maybe the best character and performance in any of the Star Wars movies. He adds layers to this like wounded, selfish, bitter man-child role that probably aren't even there on the page, but he just freaking kills it, man. I really love Adam Driver in these movies.
I've come around on Adam Driver. I think that coming out of the first time I saw it, I thought he was fine. I wasn't super impressed. Coming out of Last Jedi, the only thing I liked about this movie, and probably still the only thing I like, was the Kylo Ren, Rey kind of relationship development. Mm-hmm. That was the one thing I walked out of that 2 hour and 30 minute atrocity of a film. I walked out of it going, man, if we had more Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley, I'm in. I really enjoyed the development of their relationship. And so, and then we just don't talk about Rise of Skywalker. So I think I'm kind of actually with you on this. I like Kylo Ren. The one thing I don't care for is that he has him take off his mask way before he sees his dad. Narratively, I just think he's way more scary leading up until you see him with his dad. And it just makes so much more narrative sense to go, oh, he's a scared little boy.
Yeah.
And you see that when his dad comes around. That's the moment you reveal his face. Not just, it feels kind of throwaway that he just takes his mask off randomly.
Well, I will say, I actually like the place where they have him do it because it clues the audience in even earlier that he is a scared little boy and that he's already facing this internal struggle. So that when he delivers that line on the bridge with Han Solo about I don't know if I have the strength to do this anymore, you really are bought into the idea that maybe he really wants to quit this whole thing. What really sucks about him taking off his mask when he does is they build up to it, dude. There's multiple close-up shots of Darth Vader's helmet and his own mask. And then you're he goes, I'm going to take my mask off now. And it cuts to him starting to lift it off his head from behind it's like a over-the-shoulder shot. So you can see Daisy Ridley reacting. And then it cuts back to him and it's this medium shot that looks like it wasn't even the main shot. It was some secondary camera in the background that was just doing coverage. And then he's like, boop, here I am. And he stands up and you're like, oh, that's Kylo Ren? You got to do a close up. There needs to be some sort of dark, foreboding John Williams score there. And it feels like that whole reveal is such a flop. Now, I do think that it probably is on purpose, that there is a sense of underwhelm to it because he seems really scary, but Abrams is trying to undercut that with the idea that this lanky dude is who everybody's afraid of. So I think there's good and bad to it, but ultimately I think it gets to the idea of Kylo Ren as scared man-child is really compelling narratively, but it's always going to be really underwhelming from an iconography standpoint. Same thing when they took Darth Vader's mask off at the end and he was a fat, bald old guy. Come on, that's the guy? So, because it makes a lot of sense on paper and I think it's really compelling on paper, but it just doesn't make for cool visuals.
Sure. Yeah, at the end of the day, there's a reason these guys are wearing a mask. It's because they're little baby man boys underneath. Got all sorts of teenage problems.
Do you get Bob. They're hiding behind a mask, Brad.
Nailed
Hey, dude, let's take a break, man. We haven't really started crapping on this movie. We need to talk about the two leads of the film when we come back. We need to talk about the shock value of the big twist. And we'll see where we go from there. But I want to drink some whiskey.
I just want to clarify, by saying we haven't really started crapping on the movie yet, is that a challenge? Do I need to up my crapping on?
I know it's coming from you at some point. So,
all right, I'm just checking in, man.
All right, let's drink some whiskey, Brad.
Let's get to it.
All right, so today we are kicking off 5 straight weeks with a brand that has been kind of underrepresented on this show, Brad. We've been holding off for a long time, or I guess I've been holding off on folding in Jim Beam products to our lineup because I know it's always going to be there. And it's kind of fun to be in season 8 of a podcast and still be trying something as simple as Jim Beam, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I think the time has come. We kind of missed the window for springtime of swill. We're in the back half of summer now. And I don't know if any of this is swill, but I wanted to take an opportunity to try 5 whiskeys in a row from the Jim Beam Company that are all widely available and very, very inexpensive. Now, we could start off with regular old Jim Beam. I think it might actually be more fun to finish with that one and to try some of their other widely available brands here. So we're kicking off today with Jim Beam Double Oak. Now, this is what they call a twice-barreled, expertly aged, and then matured in a second oak barrel bourbon whiskey. Clocks in at exactly 86 proof. Brad, have you ever tried double oaked Jim Beam before?
Hell no.
I can tell you that when I first moved home from Kentucky in 2017, we did not have a place to live for 4 months. We had to crash with my in-laws, who are famously teetotalers.
Yes.
And I had a bottle of whiskey up in our bedroom that I just kept hidden away. And that bottle of whiskey was Jim Beam Double Oak. I don't know how I got it or how I came to acquire this bottle. I remember not liking it, but it was all the liquor that we had. And so we relied on this bad boy. So I haven't had this in 7 years. We'll see if my palate has developed since then. But all I remember about this is that it tasted chemically and it was real cheap.
Yeah. Can I tell a quick fun story about alcohol in places we weren't supposed to have it?
Oh, sure.
So Bob and I went to seminary, and in the housing that they provided for married couples, you were not supposed to have alcohol, which is a silly rule that we all made fun of and broke. My friend Jordan had some alcohol in his house, and one of our good friends was like the one who set up all of our housing, and we all just didn't talk to her about drinking alcohol because she didn't want to know about it. Well, their house flooded one day, and in the middle of water pouring down from the ceilings, there's 15 people running in and out of the house, getting couches out and books and all these things. Jordan takes me to the side. Oh, and fire alarms are going off as well. Jordan takes me to the side. He goes, Brad, I've got 8 bottles of whiskey above my fridge. I need you to get them. And I was like, bro, I got you.
Say no more.
So I slowly snuck them all out in pillowcases.
Can I just be honest with you? I wasn't there, but I'm telling you right now, everyone knew what you were doing.
Nobody knew, Bob.
Hey, what's that lumpy pillowcase full of?
I was just as careful and stealthy with those bottles as J.J. Abrams is with humor.
I'll bet you were, man.
It was incredible. I felt so proud to be the friend that was entrusted with hiding the booze.
All right, man, let's dive into Jim Beam Double Oak. Now, I am going to tell you my one massive note on the nose here, but I want to see if you picked up on it first, Brad. So hit me with your nosing notes.
Just a big old honking, just massive note, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
I got salt and peanuts, oak, youth, cola, and apple peel.
Like you say youth, it's a substance.
Yes,
like you're the
youths.
witch in Snow White. Just a bottle Ugh, the sweet smell of youth.
Those are the things that I got on this.
So this has been sitting in my glass for about 5 minutes now. And for the first 3-ish minutes, it needs to open up and breathe a little bit.
You got the youth, didn't you?
Oh, man. No, it was straight black licorice, like anise extract. And I was like, oh, Brad is going to hate this. It's definitely calmed down a bit. I get a lot of that peanut. And that's the big thing people get on Jim Beam products is peanut. It's there. I get a lot of vanilla. The oak is definitely present. It's not quite as young as I expected it to be, but it is a little bit harsher than something like a Woodford double oak. And I think that's because we're drinking a cheaper product here. But overall, I'm actually pretty impressed with this. There's way more complexity here than I anticipated. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 on the nose.
Yeah, I actually like this a decent amount. I also gave it a 7 out of 10 on the nose, and thankfully, I did not get that black anise.
Mm-mm.
I think as I moved into the palate here, though, Bob, this has a really nice peanutty flavor to it. It's got that beam nuttiness. There was a bit of an apple fritter, kind of caramely, appley goodness. It was very dusty, and it kind of gave me just hints of a big league chew. That dustiness had just enough fruitiness to it that I was like, oh, this is kind of a nice bubblegummy flavor. Nothing to write home about, but I would say this is a pretty solid experience. I came up from the nose to a 7.5.
I'm having a weird experience, and I need you to help me figure out what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
You ever had to gargle with salt water? If you have a irritated throat, or even if you've never done that, accidentally gotten a mouthful of seawater before. And there's just something inherently that happens, not a gag reflex thing, but while it's in your mouth knows I am not supposed to have a liquid this salty going on in here. I don't actually taste salt in this, but I'm having that sort of guttural reaction.
This whiskey shouldn't be in my mouth.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I have something that's too saline heavy in my mouth. And so my predominant note on this is it's really saline heavy. I don't know that I actually taste salt, but I'm mimicking that reaction. The oak is definitely here. I can see why I thought this tasted chemically back then, because it's a bitter oak, and it's definitely a more astringent, less quality whiskey that they are double oaking here. And so I think the bitterness of that oak paired with what is probably youth and some really aggressive grain that I'm getting on this, it just kind of tastes like it has the saline of a blended malt scotch, but they've double barreled it. And this is not really my cup of tea, man. I'm only going to give this a 5.5 on the palate.
Oh, man. Yeah, for me, the finish is where this really falls off, and the youth kind of comes through. It turns into this kind of bitter, soury apple flavor. The oakiness really comes through. It reminds me almost of an apple cider vinegar. There's some bitter cherry going on. The finish is what really dropped off for me. I'll give it a 5 out of 10 here.
I actually think the finish is a little bit nicer for me, and I just had my third sip of this. The vanilla definitely comes out a bit. I can see where you're getting that apple. It reminds me a little bit more of a rum on the back of the palate, a barely aged rum. And so I'm getting kind of aggressively young grain here mixed with really, really sweet sugary notes. And I don't know, are you a rum drinker, Brad?
I have a few of my whiskey friends who are really into rum lately. And they give me these medium to high end rums. Think a Woodford double oaked level of rum. And I don't really like them that much.
No, I'm the same way.
They're not great.
I'm the same way with rum as I am with tequila, because rums aren't typically aged as long as whiskeys are, right? If you have an 18-month aged rum, it's considered heavily aged. But it carries those sort of youthful notes that we are trained to know in whiskey are a sign of poor quality. So yeah. I try a really good quality rum, but it tastes to me like poor quality whiskey. And so I can't get into rum or tequila because of that. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what's going on here, man. This finish is not horrible, but it reminds me of rum. And that's probably not something you want on your whiskey. I'll give it a 6. And then on the balance, I think this really falls off from the nose to the taste to the finish. I'll give that a 6 as well.
Yeah, I think balance-wise, it has enough of a nose and palate that I like, that I'll keep it a decent score. But I'm at a 6 out of 10 on balance.
All right, that brings us to value. Now, as far as I know, this is, what, Brad, like $20-$25?
It is $19.99.
Listen, man, it is pretty remarkable to get a double-oaked product for $20.
Uh-huh.
And I think that, like, if you told me you can get a double-oaked product for $20, I would probably expect it to taste like this. Like, I don't think this is a very good whiskey. I also don't think it's overpriced. You know what I mean? Like,
nope,
kind of cool to be able to do this at $20.
Yeah.
It's probably a pretty good mixer, too. I don't know. I've talked myself into it, Brad. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 on value.
Yeah, I'm in a similar place. I'm at 6.5.
All right, so where are you at overall on Jim Beam Double Oaked?
I'm just under our normal recommendation point. I'm at a 32 out of 50.
And I'm at a 31.5, so we're in pretty much the same spot on this, Brad. We're coming out to a 31.75 out of 50, or a 63.5 out of 100. I don't know, man. Like, pretty good for what it is.
Yeah.
Is this a recommend?
I think it is. Like, don't buy it at the bar, but like, if you want a cheap whiskey that has a little bit of nuance and flavor to it, like, yeah, it's $20, man. Go for it.
It's pretty hard to not recommend a $20 whiskey.
Yeah.
You know what I
there's
mean?
not
Like,
a lot that we've really shied away from.
Now, is this even remotely in the league of your Rebel 100s? Absolutely not.
No.
But that is punching way above its weight class, and this is punching right at its weight class. You know what I mean? Like, if you're buying a $20 whiskey, you already know what you're getting into. And I'm here to tell you, that's exactly what you're getting here.
Mm-hmm.
There's no surprises here. It's kind of like the J.J. Abrams Force Awakens of whiskeys.
It really is, man. You're not wrong.
All right, so that is the first of 5 reviews of Jim Beam that we're going to be doing to end out our season. I think we've started in an okay spot, Brad. If they're all like this, then we might be looking at a new budget favorite brand here.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think we're in a good place with the double oaked.
All right, dude, let's get back into talking Star Wars. What do you say?
I'm ready, man. All right, everybody, that was Jim Beam Double Oaked. And Bob, do you know what goes good with whiskey?
What, Brad?
More whiskey.
Oh, yes, it does. Great answer.
I thought you might think so.
You really had me stumped there for a minute.
So back in the day, we drank, and this might be way back in the day, maybe season 2, we drank some Penelope Rosé Cask Finish. Now, this is their bourbon that is finished in a rosé cask. I don't remember if it said how long it's finished, but man, I remember drinking it back in the day, really loving it. They have just sent us another bottle of a newer iteration of the rosé cask finish, and here we are, not only drinking Jim Beam Double Oaked, but I'm gonna wash that down with a little Penelope rosé cask finish.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, man. So we just got this in the mail a couple days ago. It's always wonderful when a brand is willing to send both Brad and myself a sample of whiskey, because we live 100 miles apart. We record remotely. If only one of us gets a sample, then we have to wait until we see each other in person to divvy it up. It can take a long time. And we want to honor Penelope for being awesome supporters of our show for a really long time. As I recall, Brad, when we drank through that sample pack of different Penelope expressions, the rosé cask finish was our favorite one. And it's been a minute since we've had it. This is now batch 8 of the rosé cask finish. I know that at one point they also made a barrel-proof version of the rosé, which sounds freaking fantastic. But yeah, this is a 4-grain bourbon finished in rosé casks. It clocks in at 94 proof, so just a little bit higher than what we were just drinking. And Brad, I mean, just real quick, let me say, this smells like, do you remember when Lifesavers made those cream savers for a while?
Oh.
Dude, I don't know if they made one that had a grape flavor, but it reminds me of, like, if they could take really bright grape almost champagne-y notes, and then make a cream savor version of that.
Yeah.
It is just decadently sweet on the nose, man, and I'm loving the flavor of it as well.
Yeah, no, not that I was a connoisseur or anything, but I believe they had an orange creamsicle and a raspberry.
I remember the raspberry
creamsicle, and they were both stunningly good. If any of you patrons out there know if they still make cream savers and want to send us a bag,
Oh man,
I could go for some cream savers, Bob. Here's the deal. This rosé cask finish is incredible. There are so many beautiful grape notes that I think are heightened by the fact that it's finished in a rosé cask. Too often with cab finishes, it just gets really dark and heavy and kind of overtakes the whiskey element. I think that the rosé has such a nice light finish to it that it truly does what a finishing element should do with whiskey, and it accents the whiskey more than it overwhelms it.
Brad, I could not have said any of that better myself. This is an automatic thumbs up. When we got this PR email that they were doing a new batch and that they were offering samples, I was like, absolutely. It's been way too long since I've had that on my shelf. So thank you so much, Penelope. Brad, I am now full of whiskey. Let's get back into talking about this movie. And I think in order to do that, we need to get to our game for the day, which we call 2 Facts and a Falsehood.
Brad is gonna try to stump you, Bob, to all right and what is wrong. 2 facts and a falsehood.
2 Facts and a Falsehood is the part of the program where Brad presents me with 3 items as fact about the making of this movie, one of which is a complete lie. Brad, I am currently sitting at 15 and 12 on the season. I am really hovering on the precipice of blowing this thing, man. I want to get that 16th win so badly. And Star Wars is not the IP to get me there, man. I'm very worried.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of excited for this little stretch. I think I have a few good tricks up my sleeve, and we'll just see where it goes. But, to God be the glory in all things, and we'll see what the team can do for us.
All right, man, hit me with those 2 facts and a falsehood.
Fact number 1, John Williams was, for the first time on a Star Wars film, considered a co-composer, or credited, I should say, as a co-composer. Conrad Pope is credited as a composer as well, although he claims that he did only, quote, 2% of the work. Fact number 2, John Williams received his 50th Oscar nomination for scoring this film. He's only the second person in history to receive 50 or more nominations, the first being Walt Disney with 59 nominations. Fact number 3, this is the first J.J. Abrams film not to be scored by Michael Giacchino, as the Star Wars franchise composer John Williams returned to score the film. Coincidentally, Giacchino scored Jurassic World in 2015, a sequel to Jurassic Park, and the Lost World Jurassic Park, which were both scored by John Williams.
Wow, okay.
Your boy Johnny Williams is the only redeeming thing about this movie, Bob.
Yeah, sounds like it. All right, number 1 immediately stands out to me because I don't remember hearing anything about him co-composing this. This is really interesting. I know that number 2 is a fact. Well, I should say I know that John Williams has had at least 50 nominations now, and I know that the only other person to do that is Walt Disney. Whether that means this was his 50th one, I don't know. Maybe you made that little tidbit up. The third one sounds very plausible and was very involved, and so I think that maybe you didn't make that one up because that was a lot. That was a long walk for a short drink of water, that fact was.
And I am not known for a long walk for a short drink of water, Bob.
No, you're not. Not when it comes to making up facts.
That is rude.
I'm going to go with my gut. My gut has been wrong 85% of the time this season. I'm just going to say number 1 is the falsehood, because I think that he scored this one and he scored The Last Jedi without a co-composer. So that's my gut. Let's see what happens. Number 1's the falsehood.
Locked in?
Locked in, baby.
Locked in, baby. Bob, you have reached 500.
I did it.
Congratulations, you win nothing.
As you know, this is all I have in life, Brad. So I put all of my hopes on reaching 500 on the season. And I did it with 4 more movies to spare?
Yeah,
this is great.
This is easy cruising from here.
I could hit 20 wins this year.
Yeah, you're on a gravy train, baby.
Thanks, John Williams.
He is the man.
All right, dude, let's get back into talking about the movie itself. We left off without talking about Daisy Ridley and or John Boyega. Now, I had a very long trip for work the last couple weeks, and I like to listen to podcasts when I drive long distances. And I listened to one particular podcast that is a celebrity podcast that I will not plug here because they don't need my help. But there was an episode where the celebrities interviewed John Williams, and I listened to that whole thing. It was fantastic. And then the next one that came up after John Williams was Daisy Ridley. She's promoting a new movie that she's just made for Disney, and they were both very insightful. And it was really cool to listen to her story about how, her big break was this film. I guess let's start with her because, she is the Luke Skywalker of this trilogy. I'm going to ask you a twofold question, Brad. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the character of Rey? And then, divorced from that, what do you think of Daisy Ridley's performance?
Man, I think that the character of Rey is really boring in the hands of J.J. Abrams. I think that he relies on her kind of looking cool more than her being interesting. And there's just not enough for her to work with. I think that the actress Daisy Ridley is just okay. I don't love her performance. She feels... the way she moves doesn't feel smooth or natural.
Like physically?
I think, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think that physically she just kind of feels tight. Like nothing feels loose and fluid.
Oh,
she
like
just
mechanical kind of.
Yes. Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Is it like when we watch the Harry Potter movies and when they're like 11, you can tell that they don't know what to do with their hands and stuff like that?
What's her name? Bonnie...
Oh, and I almost said Bonnie Hunt. No, it's not Bonnie Hunt. But yes, Ginny Weasley.
Ron Weasley's smaller sister, Bonnie
Played
Hunt.
by Bonnie Hunt.
If they made an American version of Harry Potter, Bonnie Hunt would be Mrs. Weasley.
No, I want her to be Ginny now, like with no explanation. It's just there's a bunch of 11-year-olds and then her 2 feet taller than. But yes, I get what you're saying. I didn't have that experience, and I think that pretty crucially, J.J. Abrams does a really, really good job of knowing when to give his stars star-making shots. So like I said, Kylo Ren doesn't have a lot of cool iconography around him because they kind of undermine that with his character. I think for both Daisy Ridley and John Boyega, they get their really cool moments of like, we are going to turn this person into a movie star. And I think Daisy Ridley has the goods, man. She is she's kind of constantly being either emotionally or physically tortured throughout most of this movie. And I think that she reflects that really well as an actress. Now, where I have a problem with it is exactly what you said about her character. Her character is boring AF, dude. Like, you don't learn anything about her. And then that's why I really like what Rian Johnson does with her character and with Kylo Ren's manipulation of her in the second movie. Because it's a tabula rasa, dude. Like, there's nothing going on here. You know that her parents were junk traders and that they abandoned her. And that's all you know about her. And so for her being the quote unquote star of this saga, I think you got to give us a little bit more to her character, because as it stands, and here's my segue, John Boyega is the star of this movie, dude. Like, his character arc is the one that we see on screen. His backstory is the one that we see on screen. And even though everybody in this movie apparently exists to serve Rey, he's the one that gets the cool ass, like, John Wayne in Stagecoach push in shot when he first picks up a lightsaber and he's about to go hand to hand with Kylo Ren. I'm like, oh, this dude's a movie star. He's got the goods. And I think J.J. Abrams knew it, and I think everybody knew it. And that makes it even suckier what happens to his character as the trilogy goes along, because he really gets thrown under the bus. But as far as this movie goes, yes, Daisy Ridley is really, really good. Dude, John Boyega was like next level for me.
Nah.
No, come on, dude.
Dude, John Boyega, his performance is fine. I like him well enough with his performance. I think that he is given a crap sandwich of horrible dialogue, horrible comedy that doesn't fit the universe. I don't think it fits the character. There's so many things where his character feels so inconsistent and uninteresting because of it. Because you can't take him seriously as a character, Bob. He's either just a complete buffoon, class clown who's just joking around and making really weird, uninteresting jokes, or he's trying to pretend to be a hero. And honestly, he feels more like a Han Solo character than Poe, because he's this kind of roguish, I'm gonna kind of lie to get my way. Or he's trying to actually be a hero. And not because there's so many different directions his character goes in, it just all is ruined. And I want to help Daisy Ridley because I'm interested in her and I'm trying to be the hero, but then I'm going to run away on this spice freighter and be a mercenary, but then I'm going to absolutely lose my mind that Daisy Ridley gets caught and sacrifice everything to go save her. The character as written is so inconsistent that Boyega can't overcome it with a decent performance.
I agree with that, actually. And I think that's part of why I wonder if his character and all the characters got kind of trimmed back a little bit, because he has to take such huge emotional leaps that it kind of still makes sense. Like the outline of where his arc is supposed to go still makes sense. This girl, Rey, was his only friend and the only person who ever saw him as anything more than whatever, FN, whatever his number was as a stormtrooper. And so even though he decides to abandon her, when he sees her get captured, it switches something in him that is irreversible. And I understand that. But you're right. In the context of the movie, it's we just watched him kind of callously walk out on her. And then immediately he's like, no, Rey,
yeah.
Writhing on the ground. And yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that's necessarily his fault. And I think he sells it as best he can. But this gets me back to the JJ stuff, man. What is the point of this movie? What is this movie accomplishing? And I don't mean to draw comparisons to A New Hope, because I still think that movie is a little bit underbaked in the context of Star Wars. But this movie feels even less baked. It's setting up characters for a TV show where the whole pilot is just let's tease what can be and not really actually accomplish anything. I walked out of this movie feeling oh, okay. That was you trying to whet my appetite for Star Wars. But that seemed like a 2+ hour trailer for a trilogy that hasn't come yet. Do you know what I mean? It just feels narratively empty to me.
Yeah, nothing interesting happens in the movie. And honestly, this might sound crazy coming from a long-term Star Wars fan. I don't know if they should have put Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford in the movie.
Yeah, they seem like they're trying to prop up the lack of development by just continually being look, we've got Chewbacca. Here he is.
Yes. And honestly, Chewbacca, weirdly, I think I'd be more okay with being in the film somewhere. The problem with the three main characters from the original films is that, I know within the universe time has passed. But, when Harrison Ford runs onto the Millennium Falcon, I don't see Han Solo anymore. No. I see Harrison Ford.
Well, and it's the kind of entrance that, do you remember when we would watch sitcoms as a kid, whether it was Full House or whatever, and they'd have a random B-list celebrity show up?
Yeah.
It'd be MC Hammer, and everybody'd be what's he doing at Stephanie Tanner's house?
A lot.
Yeah. And it just feels like there should have been a live in-studio audience that applauded when Han Solo ran onto the ship. Like, oh, we're doing this thing now.
Yep.
I will say, though, the only narrative thread in this movie that I found really compelling was the Harrison Ford, Kylo Ren, you know, to some extent Carrie Fisher, but definitely like the Han Solo and Ben Solo storyline. Because, let's be honest, Harrison Ford, great actor, knocks it out of the park. He shows up and is like, give me my paycheck. And also when the paycheck clears, I'll give you one great scene. And then they put him on that bridge. And between him and Driver, dude, I'm going to be honest with you. I had that moment spoiled for me before I saw the movie. And so I knew it was coming, which really sucked. It's been so long since I've seen the movie, though, that even though I knew it was coming this time, I didn't have that little nagging voice in the back of my head saying, like, here it comes, here it comes, here it comes. And it's genuinely shocking. They build it up so much that you really think there's a glimmer of hope that Ben Solo might come home. And then to watch this dude get run through with a freaking lightsaber, it really did go, like, I was like, oh, no, don't do that, man. Come on. Like, even though I knew it was coming, and I have to give credit to everyone involved there, even JJ. It's a great moment.
I would agree with you that it's a great moment. I think it was one of the least shocking moments in Star Wars history.
You could tell it was coming?
Oh, bro. Come on. Like, this is movie one. We all know that something dramatic's gonna happen to twist them into the second. Like, I'm sorry, man. It felt so obvious to me that he was going to kill Han Solo. For me, it was like, come on, like, don't just use the characters that we know and love for you to prop up your own movie unless it feels deserved. And I'm not going to say that it like felt completely ridiculous or out there. I think it's just hard to go back and know the full backstory and feel like it was deserved. But like within the mythos of just this film, without the next two being out there, I think they do a decent job of setting up Kylo and Han and the animosity. So I'm okay with him killing him here. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it wasn't a surprise.
All right, man, I think we've kind of spoken our piece on this movie. Is there anything else that you need to get off your chest with it before we get into let's make it a double?
This is it's a new hope, Bob. I know I started the episode with that, but the fact that they can't come up with anything original within the universe of Star Wars is so frustrating to me. Like, you know, we're going to watch Rogue One a week from now, and I liked Rogue One more than The Force Awakens, I think. But even that, it's like, we're just going to take a one-off line from A New Hope, well, whenever they talk, in A New Hope, when she says a lot of agents died to get us this information, we're going to make an entire movie based off that one line, which, I'm fine with. But then even in that movie, there are so many elements that feel so similar to other Star Wars movies. I'm kind of like Disney, like, if you're going to let people take a chance with it, keep the core elements of what makes Star Wars, and then slowly expand the universe from there with, it might sound silly, but what I said earlier, like the fact that Kylo can use the Force in like small, fun, unique ways, like things like that are interesting. And even, like bring in new types of fighter ships and new, like bring in cool new things that add to the world building that Lucas gave us. But don't change like the core elements of what makes a Star Wars movie a Star Wars movie.
That's why I'm really interested to talk to you about The Last Jedi, because it's really hard for me as a non-Star Wars fan to understand where exactly the frustrations start with a Star Wars fan with that movie, because I know people think that he kind of like threw the baby out with the bathwater. But when I watch that movie, I really do think like, oh, he opened up this universe to possibilities that J.J. Abrams was unwilling to give us. Like, just simply the fact of like, you don't have to be from a royal bloodline to have the Force. Like, look at all these younglings that Anakin killed in the prequel trilogy. Like, They weren't all related to him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I think that things like that, yes, maybe some of the swings he struck out on, but I like that he was at least trying to do things that we hadn't yet seen in a Star Wars film to that point. And so, we can set that aside for now. I'm excited to talk to you about that. But I'm with you, dude. JJ really played it safe in this movie, and he did very little, both narratively and in terms of the filmmaking, to freshen things up. And I think that is a perfect segue into Let's Make It a Double.
We're near the end of the episode, so thanks for listening to the Film and Whiskey Show. Let's pair another film with this one, even if it's a struggle. It's the final segment of the day, now let's make it a double.
Let's Make It a Double is the part of the show where we pick a movie to pair up with this one to make the perfect double feature. Brad, I'm going to go first because it's probably the most cop-out I've ever had a cop-out. I finished Force Awakens, and I was like, dang, that really had some deficiencies. I want to immediately watch Last Jedi because I know Last Jedi is not a perfect movie, but I want to be able to articulate why I prefer it to this. And so it was like a very natural, I need to pair that up with The Last Jedi. If for nothing else, then I can have it on the top of mind why I like Last Jedi better. So it will probably be a very frustrating double feature for many people to watch those two movies back to back. But I couldn't think of another movie to watch with The Force Awakens than The Last Jedi.
I am going to pair it with a movie that I think nobody should watch because it's boring and uninteresting. I'm going to pair it with Free Guy, a Ryan Reynolds NPC movie.
That movie got a lot of crap, and it was like, and we've talked about this before, Brad, but like, everything to me feels so cut from the same cloth anymore. Every superhero movie, every IP comedy, everything with Ryan Reynolds, they're all the same movie. And I think every movie is like a variation on a 6 out of 10 movie. And so I walked out of that movie being like, yeah, it was a 6 out of 10. That's exactly what I expected it to be. People freaking hated that movie, though.
Yeah, I despised it. I don't remember why I watched it, but terrible movie. And the main reason I'm going to pair it is because of what you just said. It's a complete lack of innovation. It's a complete lack of having anything interesting to say about the world and like adding to the world of cinema. And I think that's kind of what Disney has done with the Star Wars franchise.
All right. Well, gosh, this sounds like we're going to just absolutely crater this film on our final scores. Brad, I think on a story development level, this is like a 5.5 out of 10. On a fun characters story level, this is like a 6 out of 10. I think it's like a 6.5 movie that I just feel so meh about, but it's certainly not inept. It is made well enough in every single facet. And I think when I think about like a well enough movie, that's a 2.5 stars for me. And so I think that's where I'm going to land here. It's a 6.5 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm in a really similar place. I want this movie to be good. And I know that a lot of Star Wars fans kind of get criticized for just wanting to be critical. And I'm sure that there are some who are like that. Bob, I want to have fun with Star Wars movies. Like, I overlook a lot of flaws that George Lucas has as a director, because he creates incredibly beautiful, really fun, and great iconic moments that are just awesome and really cool and fun to watch. And I think Disney has just neutered all of that innovation completely. And so I want to give this a good score. I want to enjoy it. I wanted to enjoy it when it came out in 2015. I was so jacked for that movie. And yet here we are. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I think it's okay, but I want there to be so much more, man.
All right, so we are coming to a 6.25 out of 10 on The Force Awakens. But we want to know what you think. Are we too harsh on this one? Are we not harsh enough? You can find us on all of our social medias: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Brad, I've actually created a LinkedIn page for us now. For all you professionals out there,
oh my goodness.
Let us know on any of those social medias. You can find us at Film Whiskey.
Can I get added as an employee at Film and Whiskey?
No.
Ah, dang it. Okay, well, if you want to join the conversation that Bob clearly doesn't want any of us to be a part of, you can find us on Discord. You can get the link at the end of any single one of our show notes.
Next week, we'll be back talking more Star Wars when it comes to the film Rogue One. We'll be joined by a very special guest for that one as well. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.